Hi,
Hello.
everybody. My name is Barbara Smith,
And
and
I'm Christian McNeill.
we are really excited to be here with you today and to carry on with this conversation about fear-proofing the pandemic. And the title we chose today was Taking Care of Your Recovery, but we wanted to sort of say that that was false advertising in a way, and that we really are talking about something so much more universal. And it has tremendous impact for people in recovery as well as everyone else. So people who are here who may not be in recovery need not fear this, the conversation that we're going to have and the understanding we're going to continue to build on. What Joe and Jacqueline shared last week applies to everyone. So it's a good thing to hear at this time about our innate resilience and strength. So, Christian, I don't know if you want to start by just telling people a little bit about you and how we
Sure.
met and why we're
Yeah.
working together. And
Yeah. So I don't know how long we've known each other, Barbara, but probably, a little bit over a year. Just and I'm
probably is, I think now.
Is it? Is
Yeah.
it? Yeah. So we I live in Glasgow in Scotland, and as it happens, I am in recovery, and I got sober quite a long time ago in 1988, and went through a kind of conventional here in Scotland anyway, just through 12-step recovery, and I think kind of, I know some of you on the call are very familiar with my story, but I stayed sober, and it was a great thing that it was a massive change in my life. But I can continue to kind of struggle and strive, and there was a lot of there were a lot of issues in my life, and I just had that sense of searching, and as a result of that search, I would find something new like meditation, TM, NLP, hypnotherapy, any number of things, Reiki. And over the years, I built just more and more and more qualifications and practices and tools in my toolbox. And none of them really seemed to deal with that searching thing. And then around 10 years ago, I stumbled across what we're now referring to as the three principles paradigm, or at least I'm referring to it as that. And I really did stumble across it. I thought I was on a kind of business development weekend for people in the NLP world, which is another of my tools in the tool bag. And it hit me like a train. I suddenly thought, this is what I've been looking for, that this explanation of how people operate, where our feelings come from, what we are at essence, and so on. And I think everybody on this call, and it has some, or probably possibly much more familiarity with this work than I do. But it really, I knew I'd found what I was looking for, and I knew somehow I was going to be involved in it for the rest of my life. But at that point, I was a lawyer, and I didn't think of being involved in it professionally necessarily. I just knew I'd found the thing. And also, there was something about it that enabled me to know that I could put everything else down. I didn't need to do that other stuff in order to be okay, because I got that I already had what I needed within me, that the answers were within me. And so roll forward quite a few years, and it turned out I changed career. All sorts of life events happened, all sorts of circumstances changed. And I met Barbara on a webinar such as this, and I think she was sharing and I was part of the audience, but it could have been the other way around. And there was something about her that I really, really liked. I thought, this woman speaks particular common sense that resonates with me. And we kind of made contact, and I exchanged some emails and had some calls, and she very generously invited me to visit her in the Azores, which was set up for October of last year. And then on another call that we were on, we were both talking about doing a bit of writing and how we like to write, and somehow the idea of writing a book together was born, because from my point of view, and that how I saw you then, Barbara, was that you were a psychotherapist working with lots of people in recovery, and I had the more of the kind of user's tale. And so we had this idea of writing a book, and we didn't do anything more about it at that point. But in October, when I went to visit Barbara in the Azores, we kind of sat down, and we didn't do a huge amount of work then, in fairness. We came up with a title, and we came up with a sort of spine of chapter titles, and we kind of went through it and said, well, I'd quite like to write about that one, and I'd like to write about that one. And we came up with a kind of method, which was that we'd each take the ones we'd chosen, and we found a way to share them online through Dropbox, Word on Dropbox, and we both gave each other sort of permission to edit the others, and so on. And so that was the method that we were going to use when we got back, and we did. And actually, the book was written by Christmas. That was it really was that thing of it just was, well, speaking from my part, and I know from what you said, Barbara, it just kind of flowed. I mean, what you make of it, that's your discernment. But it was such a joy to write, and it was a wonderful experience, because as well as the sharing with Barbara, and the whole process was, getting to know each other better as well. There was an opportunity in that writing to kind of, for me, to sort of, to really very affirming, to sort of see what I understand and what I know and what I have to offer other people. And then there was the process of coming together and sort of teasing things out of, is that bit quite right? Is that thing that we're saying there quite right? And I just found it a really fascinating and creative process, and one of the most enjoyable things that I've done in my entire life, if I'm honest. And the next bit, the whole next bit of getting it published was like a different chapter again. But that the part of the idea of the book was to support the conference that Joe and I've just had a mental blank. Amy, I had a mental blank from that Joe and Amy had spearheaded earlier in the year, and they'd invited us to be part of both the team that was setting that up and was going to be involved in the conference. And as I imagine all of you now know, that conference has had to be postponed because of the current pandemic. But Joe and Amy and some of the others had the idea of putting on these conferences, these online conference calls instead. So this is number 2 of 3. I think for anyone who missed it, the recording of Joe and Amy's, which happened Joe and Jacqueline Hollow's, which happened last week, is available. And next week, Amy Johnson is going to be doing the 3rd one. So that's kind of a bit of a whistle-stop tour of who we are and why we're here today, and this whole idea of fear-proofing the pandemic is certainly one that resonates with me, and so I'm delighted to be part of this, and it's a real honour to be here. And I think that's probably enough from me at the moment. Barbara, back over to you.
Well, I just wanted to say, for those of you who aren't familiar with me, Christian knows more people than I do, but for those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Barbara Smith, and I am, as Christian said, a psychotherapist. I've been a psychotherapist for over 40 years, and I have been around several blocks in the psychotherapy world. And like Christian, I was really involved in a lot of searching. Psychotherapy it's a soft science that's based on theories. And so each new theory du jour, each new continuing education credit, you come back with another new plan for how you're going to help your clients. And it was really a very genuine effort on everyone's part to try to to try to help people. That's why we were in the business. We wanted to try to help people. So we just kept searching for what were the answers to people's suffering. And so I used to really joke about this even before I learned the principles that, you know, you'd have psychotherapy du jour. You know, I got rid of 197 books when I learned these principles, and I had my first really major insight into the way it worked. Because I had been searching for what would help, what would be the answer to people's suffering. And I had a very full practice. You couldn't get in to see me because if one of my people eventually did get better and move on, there were 3 people who had hit a bump in the road and wanted to come back. So I thought that made me a really good psychotherapist, and I think I felt that I was doing really well to be that successful. And then after a long bout with, like Joe and one of the other people who shared last week, a long 8-year bout with neurological Lyme disease, I got to the point in my life where I was beginning to re-examine my practice and what I was doing. And all of a sudden, I just started seeing things differently. I thought, what are we doing? Why are we going over this stuff again? Like, why are we still talking about your mother after 12 years? And it just all of a sudden didn't make any sense to me anymore. So I thought, you know, I think I need a career change because I can't keep doing this and showing up in the way that I really wanted to show up for my clients, with the love and the patience and the compassion. So I was introduced through a roundabout thing that I won't go into, to Annika Hurwitz, who some of you may know, who started talking with me about this new understanding that we're going to be talking about today. And I think, you know, most of you have probably heard about it to some degree, but I think that understanding, just the way it did for Christian, changed everything for me in terms of seeing answers to why things worked when they worked and why they didn't work when they didn't work. I had been involved in the field of addictions as part of my evolutionary process in my practice the past 30 years. And I'm getting a message that my speaker isn't working. Is everything okay, Peter?
Yeah, it's actually a little garbled at times.
Okay, let me see if I can pull it closer. How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah.
Is that better?
It seems to be now. Yeah.
Okay.
If it happens again, I'll let you know, and you might need to restart your computer or something, and or switch some audio settings. Oh, now we're not hearing you at all.
I wonder if your connection's loose, Barbara.
I'm just gonna
to this understanding, and I had been in psychotherapy in the field of addiction for a number of years now, over 30 years. And my office was filled with a lot of people who had even been in recovery for a period of many, many years and weren't really thriving. And I remember saying to people before I learned this, I remember saying to people, where's the joy? Like, where's your joy? And people would look at me like I had 12 heads. Like they were doing everything they were supposed to do. They were practicing, you know, they were going to meetings, they were doing, you know, or doing their meditation or going to this yoga class or whatever, but they were really genuinely not happy. And again, this questioning just kept sort of bubbling up in me, like, what are we doing? What is this about? So when I learned these principles, everything started to come into focus for me in a totally different way. I really started to see the answers that I'd been looking for of what really was at the heart of people's unhappiness. And I think that's really where we can sort of weave this into the whole issue of fear and the pandemic and everything. And that is to really see that our experience of life is always being created by how we think in any given moment. That really, if you were to whittle down all the stuff that's being taught about this online, it really comes down to that very basic truth that we are living in the feeling of our thinking about the pandemic, about our addiction, about the world around us. In every moment, it's being created by the creative power of our imagination, of our thinking. And when we see that it isn't, that what we're experiencing actually isn't the outside world, but it actually is our thinking about the outside world, then we have a whole new set of, a whole new capacity really to deal with what's going on. So I watch myself during this pandemic, and I can see myself going in and out of these mood states. At one moment I'm terrified when I start to write, when my imagination, when this creative seed gets planted in my mind, and I start germinating that seed of fear of what's going to happen. Where is this going to end up? And if I germinate that seed, my imagination is as good as Stephen King's or better. I can write some end of life scenarios that are remarkable. I mean, they are very creative, but the good news is today I can see that that's all made up, that that's an imaginary process that my mind is taking me on. Of late, I've sort of seen it as this hot air balloon that sort of carries me away. And I get really caught up in this belief that, or without seeing it, about writing these horrible outcomes. And then I wake up and then I remember, oh yeah, wait a minute. Now we're back. We're back here, back to our regular schedule of programming. Right here, right now, what's in front of us. Well, when I look around at that, I'm fine. Like, my health is good. My partner's health is good. We live in a beautiful place. We have everything we need. So in this moment, when my mind is calm and clear and I'm not jumping on my hot air balloon and I'm not watering those seeds or germinating those seeds, those creative seeds about what is going to happen, and I'm present to what is happening, it's a whole different experience. And I don't know, Kristen, if you want to share your version of that.
Sure, thank you. I mean, what was coming to me when you were speaking, Barbara, was I was on a call with a client earlier today, and she said to me, so she's someone again who's familiar with the inside out understanding, but she said to me, so do you never try to change your thinking? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, no, actually, I don't ever try to do that. But sometimes, just like everybody in my experience, whether we know this or not, sometimes I get very, very caught up in my feelings, and the belief, the false belief that those are caused by the circumstances around me. And for some reason, that throughout, we've been in lockdown here for about 3 weeks, and but for some reason, I seem to have just been fairly accepting of that. It isn't like positive thinking or a big effort. Mostly I've been in relatively relaxed. But I did have one complete, just meltdown just about 3 weeks ago. And my son my grown-up son and his girlfriend live in London, and there was a quite sort of powerful rumor that they were going to really lock London down and bring the military in, and so we decided that they live in a very small flat, and that we decided that they would come up here for the duration, as my house is a bit bigger, and then it was going to happen. It was going to happen that day. You know, there was a very sort of complicated arrangement to bring them here. And then my son phoned me to say, actually, I'm waiting for a delivery of a monitor for working from home, and it hasn't arrived, so I might put it off. And I just in that moment went into complete, you know, panic. I mean, you know, literally, a thing I haven't had for years and years, the heart going and the whole 9 yards. And of course, in that moment, the only thing I wanted to change was the circumstance. You know, that was the only thing, because I thought that my panic and anxiety were coming from, you know, this crazy, as I saw it, delay that he was contemplating. And then it came back to me. That it's my thinking. You know, it's not what's happening here. It's my thinking. Now, that did not have the immediate effect of, you know, I wasn't peace and love and serenity man, but something shifted, and I had instead of putting all my energy into trying to change the outside, I knew it would help me in that moment to speak to you, Barbara. And I picked up the phone and we managed to get 5 minutes, because I knew that even though I was still caught up in anxiety or fear, to stick with the topic of today, that fear was being generated within, and my wisdom in that moment prompted me to have a conversation with you, which was helpful, and you know, gradually, before anything had changed on the outside, gradually I came back to that place of peace or neutrality, I suppose, because it still made sense to me to sort of take action on the situation with my son and his girlfriend, who are now here. But it's interesting because I'm never drawn to try and think or change my thinking or in that way. You know, that's not where my mind goes. When I'm caught up in the illusion that I am the victim of circumstances, I want to put all my energy into changing circumstances. But the beauty of this understanding is the awareness that it really is true that no circumstance has the power to create any given feeling in me. And in some ways I feel I've been fortunate, because I've really seen the evidence of that in the 9 or 10 years that I've been involved in this work. I mean, early on, my dad became terminally ill. I mean, within weeks of me discovering this, and it was the most extraordinary. I can't even now explain what was going on, but somehow the little that I knew about the principles was helping me, and it was a very extraordinary kind of loving and connecting and spiritual experience over the weeks that he died. It wasn't very long, but you know, it was a couple of weeks, something like that, where we knew from the date of diagnosis to the day that he actually died. And actually, it was Good Friday, so it isn't the same date tomorrow, but it seems like that's a very special day for me now, and not sad, but important, and connecting and touching. And so I think it's this Wednesday. Anyway, Good Friday is this week, and you know, that I will certainly be thinking of him in that time. And one other thing that happened to me early on in you know, my adventure with the three principles was a strange kind of. It actually turned out to be a detached retina, but I had some strange visual symptoms and was taken into the emergency department at hospital. And a doctor said to me, well, they did a certain amount of examination. They said to me, well, we think you've had a brain hemorrhage, and after we've admitted you, we'll be doing a lumbar puncture. And I'm thinking, what? Just, and then the person left the room, and I was in this room on my own, and I just fell into this place of complete peace and clarity. I thought, if I survive this, I'm going to make some changes in my life. But I wasn't in denial. I mean, I knew that because they also said that you may still die, you may yet die, but I was in a place of extraordinary peace, and it's interesting because I knew it was nothing to do with me, and I knew that I don't feel today that were I to face a similar kind of emergency situation, I would necessarily be there. But I know, once you've had the experience of, this is how I see it, having had the experience of these, significant events in life, and being gifted with the grace of being at peace with them, it does become unarguable that the events don't create the inner experience. I was lucky on those occasions that my thinking wasn't taking me to a place of panic or fear, and many other things have happened since. But it's not about, for me, the importance of understanding how we operate and how the creative potential that we have it's not about being happy all the time or never having anxiety. It's having a different relationship with it, being able to take it less seriously when it does come up. And that applies to every emotion. That for me, it's very comforting to know that it's completely natural and completely normal to experience all of them, but also to know that there's something deeper underneath the what's going on in the moment-to-moment emotion, and having the awareness that we can come back to that will always, it's always there, and we can always come back to that. Barbara.
Well, one of the things I said to a client yesterday who's really struggling, he's a young client and he's very anxious about the coronavirus and his health and what's going to happen. And I said to him, you do realize that there are a lot of symptoms to the coronavirus that we know of. Your lungs hurt, you have a cough, you have a fever, we know those, but anxiety is not one of them. That is not a symptom of the coronavirus. And that really shifted something for him, to see, isn't that interesting? That this fear that I'm feeling really is being self-generated. And it's the process, I think, of seeing that, of the realization that our experiences that, again, if you look at the wide range of people's experiences of this virus, I do spend time on Facebook. It's a wonderful way for me to connect with people around the world, old friends, old colleagues, family. And, you see the humor. I mean, the laugh out loud humor, the creativity that people are coming up with, and the fear, and the despair, the whole range of human emotion. And when we aren't afraid of that range and we just kind of ride it, like a wave. I live on the ocean, two sides of the ocean, but I live by the ocean. And, people, when you're caught in a riptide, when you're swimming and there's a current in the water that pulls you out, one of the things that they say is, don't struggle. The key to not drowning when you're being pulled by a tide, by a current that exists in the ocean, is to relax into it and to let it pull you And when it's done pulling, then you swim to the side and swim back to shore. And that's a life-saving technique. So when we can see that we're going to have all kinds of emotions, all kinds of thinking that are going to keep generating these very creative scenarios that have nothing to do with where we are in any given moment. Once we start to see and we start to relax into that sort of creative flow that's moving by us so quickly, you know, it's kind of humorous in some ways. Like, wow, look at what my mind just did. So one of the stories I wanted to tell you, because I think it made me laugh. I hope it'll make you laugh. But one of the things that I love, and I've loved for many, many years, is that when I go to bed, I like to take my iPod and listen to books on tape. I love being read to. It's very soothing to me to be read to when I'm going to sleep. So I got in bed and put my little earbuds in, and I'm laying in bed and, you know, ready to be carried off by my book. And all of a sudden I started noticing this incredible tension in my shoulders and in my chest. I was just like really bound up. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I never turned on my iPod. I was all a thought created, like nightmare that I had totally immersed myself in, that I didn't even see until I woke up. And then I was like, oh, wow, look at the power that my imagination has to take me to a place that is really dark and really scary. But my body was able to give me that clue that, whoa, something's out of whack here. This isn't the direction we want to be going and to go to sleep. You know, so the system kicked in and I was able to wake up and start to see, oh my goodness, look at this power of thought I don't know about any of you, but I'm finding people right now are very distracted. They have a lot on their minds. I drove through a stop sign the other day. My partner had nearly ran over a bicyclist. I mean, you know, we have a lot on our mind. So when we start to see that that's what's generating the current that can pull us out, and we just kind of see it and we wait and we work with it and we let it carry us until it's done, and then we can reground ourselves, swim back in. That system is always working in this amazing way to protect us. You know, when we think that there's something we have to do to protect us, or that something or something outside of ourselves is going to keep us safe from emotional ups and downs, you know, again, the search is going to be pretty fruitless because the answers aren't out there. And so people can exhaust themselves with that. And that's where I think we drown. You know, when we're exhausted by the search of looking for something that you're not going to find outside yourself.
One of the things that Barbara and I thought might be interesting is to invite anyone who's on the call to share what's been helpful at this time for you through knowing what you know.
If people would like to share, they can either raise their hand. We can see at least half of the people. If you're off video, there should be a digital raise hand button, and then we can call on you and unmute you.
One of the great gifts in 12-step recovery is sharing our strength, hope, and courage. So we thought this would be an opportunity for us to, for those of you, and I don't have a clear understanding of who's on this call, but for those of you whose have noticed the ways in which this understanding has helped you weather. I've noticed for sure that my clients, I share an office with a traditional psychotherapist who is not aware of this. And she's texting me all the time saying, oh my God, I'm swamped. All my clients are coming back. Or, I just I'm overwhelmed. Everybody's like so upset and so anxious. And my clients for the most part are like, I'm good. I'm okay. I'll check in with you if I need you. So that's one thing that I've seen. I've seen a much calmer client load, and people who find that they're really connecting with an inner strength that they really discovered as the result of this understanding. So that would be my contribution to this conversation. If other people want to chime in about what they're seeing or what they're not, maybe there's a place where you're really stuck or you've lost sight of it. We're open to hearing that as well.
I see Lynn has
Lynn.
up.
Hi, yes, good morning. I'm just thrilled to be here now. What I've seen in the principles over the last, since 1980, has given me really a new breath of life in my profession of nursing. So having the opportunity now to share our topic, which is resilience, has been just so tremendously beneficial, not only to our audience, but to ourselves, my faculty and my students. I've had the opportunity already to book about more than a dozen podcasts and live radio shows. And we did our first one last night. The woman who was the nurse presenting us was very concerned about bringing brand new nurses into the workforce. And as my conversation with her went along, she seemed to settle down. And it was wonderful to see that, because that settledness is what she will be bringing to the new nurses that weren't quite ready, but will be coming into the workforce now. So I thank you for everything that you're doing in regard to bringing this to the world.
Thank you. Such a gift to share this understanding with people. Both Christian and I have felt our lives be so changed, and the fact that we get to do this for a living just is really cool. So Thank you, Lynn. Anybody else?
I saw Joe's hand. I also want to ask a question, but I'll let Joe go first. Well, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I shared the first webinar with my father, and he said, what are the 3 principles? Did they talk about them and I missed them? And I said, well, I don't know if me explaining them would help you, Dad, but here they are. And so I'm aware there may be people that are wondering what the 3 principles are, and it might help them to have you guys talk about them a little in more detail, if it's appropriate. But just wanted to put that out there.
It's a really good question, and thanks for the reminder, because it does just slip out, and then it's only when somebody asks a question like that, Peter, that reminds me. I tend not to talk about 3 principles, except if I'm in a situation where it's broadly other 3 principles people. So here's my go, and Barbara, you can clean it up afterwards. The 3 principles are in ultra brief: mind, thought, and consciousness. And as I see mind, it's just the energy of all things, the energy of the universe. Thought is the creative power that we human beings have to create our experience. And consciousness is simply awareness. How I see it is awareness of, initially awareness of that experience that's been created. But it seems to me that consciousness is expanded, or awareness is expanded, as I've come to understand that the three principles are operating in me and in all of us all the time. Having an awareness of the system, and that's the bit that's transformative. That's the bit that has made a difference in my life. And that awareness has grown for me via a series of insights and realizations. And those in themselves seem to be events of grace. They're not within my conscious control, but with each, it's as if with each realization and awareness of how we operate and who we are, and how the essence of being human, that has given me the ability to go through life with, to wear life like a loose garment instead of chainmail, which it felt like at times in the past. So that's my attempt. That's my best attempt. Mind, thought, and consciousness.
Well, I would just say that, like Christian, I don't typically talk about the three principles. I will, if people have the question, Peter, I will say mind, thought, and consciousness, and now you can sort of like put that to the side, because I struggle with explaining it in a way that, you know, people can wrap their brain around. So I tend to just say that in my mind, that when Sydney Banks described the three principles, what he was describing was an operating system that he observed in human psychology that made us, that when we can see how it all is working, you know, in the field of psychotherapy, I say this a lot to people, our focus had been so much on a pathology-based model. We were looking at everything that was wrong with people. So our focus had been on a diagnosis, on what was broken. In order to get insurance coverage, we needed to really focus on what was broken, because it's a medical model and you're taking medical insurance to treat it. So we focused entirely on what was broken in people. And that became what we saw. We saw pathology, we saw brokenness. We tried to fix it. We fixed what was wrong with you. And then what I see with this is our visual has shifted to see, rather than this very narrow scope of our brokenness, this whole range of incredible things that we're capable of, resilience and intuition and insight. And, you know, my business is called Gifts of Insight. I mean, just insight's amazing. Like, if you really start thinking about it, I've always considered myself an insight-oriented psychotherapist, but I don't know that anybody ever really talked about, well, what is insight and where does it come from? And like, that's really awesome that an insight can change your life completely in one aha moment. Like, everything can shift. Like, we can be transformed by seeing something. We can get sober after having years and years and years of going back and forth. That one moment, one new, clear, fresh thought that can enter our minds can transform everything. When we start looking at it through that lens, wow. So to me, thought, mind, and consciousness are beyond my ability to express this amazing design that all of us have to help us get through life, to rise to the challenges that we are faced. I often say to people, because again, I live on the ocean, that we're built to sustain hurricane force winds. You know, in the Azores, our house has 18-inch walls. You know, they're built to sustain. We're not worried about it blowing away. You know, the roof is cement and the walls are 18 inches thick. Well, in a way, these three components or elements, if you will, that work together to help us to get through life, to rise to the challenge, to to wake up, to, you know, like we weren't designed to not get through life. Like we're designed to get through life, to figure it out. Before we had psychology, people figured it out and they got to where they needed to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you know, conquered new worlds and they settled new places, and all of these elements of this amazing operating system that our minds have are what are at the foundation of what makes of what helps us to get through life. And again, when we can focus on that and just see that when we get caught up in our personal thinking, in, you know, and we jump on the hot air balloon of our personal thoughts that frighten us, or the creative ability of our thinking to take us off course, when we see how that works and we sort of correct that misunderstanding and people start to shift their focus to this, to me, that's the important feature of the whole principle concept. I think the other thing for me that I describe to people is that, you know, we're not working with theory here. This is foundational truth of how it works. And to me, that just takes a lot off people's minds and really grounds them in a way that I've seen remarkable responses to this. I mean, within about 6 weeks of shifting my practice over, I lost 75% of my clients because they all came in telling me they were fine. You know, that's unprecedented in over 40 years of doing this work. I remember saying to Keith Blevins at the time, like, now what do we do? Like, I need an income. Like, now what? And he just sort of laughed and said, well, you know, you need some more clients. So to me, when you can point to this, our innate health, our innate wellness, our design to be able to make it through the world easily and comfortably, resiliently, you know, that's much more important than really specifying the details of how they each work for me in the way that I work with it. Because I always get tongue-tied when I try to describe it. I'm not I'm not that articulate. Does that help, Peter?
Yeah, that was great. I think what I'm hearing in what you're both saying is that these principles are kind of just evidence of our resilience, and that's really helpful. So thank you. I think Joe had something to share.
Are you going to unmute him, Peter?
Oh, I don't. Joe, did you want to say something?
Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So thank you for your answers to that, Barbara and Christian. That was really nice. And but when I originally raised my hand, I was really responding to Lynn McWright, who is a nurse educator and is teaching these principles to lots and lots of nurses. And I was just thinking of all the first responders out there who are working on this pandemic, who, without an understanding of the nature of resilience, the nature of the mind and how it works, are experiencing huge amounts of burnout. You see it on TV every night, all these physicians and nurses and everybody who, the ambulance drivers, the people who are on the front lines of this are understandably fatigued, but you can see the mental agony that's coming along with that, the fear and the anxiety, really weighting that resiliency down. And so for me, when I was just interviewed with Sheena, I can't remember her last name right now, is writing a book on coaching, and she asked me, what's your philosophy of coaching? How do you see coaching? And I said, well, philosophy for me of coaching or counseling people is that I see everybody as innately healthy, that they're already resilient, that they already have this divine design of perfectly being able to rebound from adversity, to rise above circumstances, to heal and get over illness, psychological or physical. And that that teaching these principles to first responders, as I've done for many years in healthcare systems, it's just unbelievably powerful how the burnout rate goes down. I think at Mayo Clinic where I worked, the burnout rate went down 70% with the people who went through the resilient healer or the resilient physician program. So this is not something you have to put into people. Resilience isn't something you put into people. It's something that by removing the thinking through understanding that's holding that resilience down, that resiliency naturally comes up. And I love Barbara's metaphor of the eddies in the ocean that take you out. And if you fight against that current, you're going to drown. But when you're not afraid of your psychological experiences, Jacqueline talked about on the last talk last week, having gone through a depression, understanding the principles allowed her to pop out of that in a very short time rather than devolving into a long-term illness. So understanding the principles doesn't create resilience. It removes the barriers to resilience so that resilience can pop up. And I just hope that this message gets out to all the nurses and all of the anesthesiologists and the physicians and the first responders and all the people who are really on the front lines fighting this pandemic, and on then the rest of us who are in lockdown, dealing with whatever we're dealing with. Because for me, this period, even though I've had my moments, believe me, where I felt anxious or I felt scared of what was coming and seeing the reports or nightmares or even, but the understanding of how my experience is being created moment to moment, it just pops back that resilience. And I have to say, my wife and I are having the grandest time being on lockdown. We're really enjoying slowing down at the speed of life and slowing down at the speed of love and fear-proofing our life. All the things I've written about for years, I've really like, oh, that's what I was saying. So it's really a deepening experience for me going through this. It deepens my resilience rather than shattering it. And that's what this understanding that Christian and Barbara are pointing to today, I think is illuminating. So that's all I have to say.
Lovely, thank you.
I see Trina's hand up.
Hi. Sorry you can't see my face. I haven't showered yet today, so I left the video off. But so I was just chiming in. I raised my hand when you guys said, if anyone wanted to share their experience, what was going on recently with the pandemic and stuff. And I'm one of Barbara's clients, and I was fortunate that she came out of retirement so that I could speak with her during this time, because I was feeling a lot of stress and anxiety about what was going on and everything. And just yesterday I spoke with her, and one of the things that was really helpful, I'm always saying to her that, you know, why am I not getting this? I've listened to every podcast, I've read every book, I've talked to you a million times. Like, why am I not getting this? I understand, you know, we're living in the feeling of our thoughts. I understand, like, you know, all this stuff, but I just don't seem to be getting it. And then I was telling her about how, you know, I had seen that there are a lot of people that were not getting along with the people who they were quarantined with. And I was saying how I was getting along so much better with my husband now, because I'm learning how to hold my tongue and not say everything that comes up right away. And then I was also telling her about a relationship with my mother, which was very strained for almost 50 years, and how I've had so much more patience with her, and we have such a better relationship. And Barbara kind of said, well, see, you know, that's it, you know, you're doing it, like, with, that's huge, those two things. So I think that, you know, it made me feel like, okay, I am kind of getting it, even though I thought I wasn't. And then I realized my mother gave me a call after that talk with Barbara, and she tested me because she was, you know, I was seeing her old self come out, and I was starting to react to it, and being kind of defensive and whatever. And then I saw, you know, oh, wait a second, like, so I'm not always going to be perfect, you know, but I'm still overall doing better, and I do see it sooner. So I guess that's all I wanted to contribute, is that, you know, just, you know, maybe looking into where you have been successful, and not feeling like a failure when it comes to 3 principles. I think that helped to open up my eyes a little. So thanks, Barbara.
Oh, thank you, Trina, for sharing that. Yeah. I mean, I think the best symptom that we have from this is just life gets easier. It just gets easier. Like, it doesn't mean we don't get caught, because we all do. You know, I can get caught in a heartbeat with the misunderstanding. Kristen and I wrote a lot about that in the book, that, you know, we get caught multiple times a day. It feels so true that, you know, these stories we're making about life, you know, just feel like virtual reality. And we can get so swept up in them, and we forget, oh yeah, this really isn't coming from, you know, the pandemic. This is really coming from stories that I'm creating about the pandemic right now. And once you just start seeing and experiencing, I mean, until you experience it a little bit more, you know, it's just a bunch of words. But once you experience the ease and the comfort that comes from knowing about your resilience, and seeing how much less effort has to go into being well. You don't have to go to 100 yoga classes or meetings a week, or, you know, do any list of to-dos or amends, and maybe Kristen, you want to talk more about that too. Takes a lot off our minds.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I just wanted to say something. Thanks for what you shared, Trina, and you touched on this too, Barbara. It seems to me that one of the values of having any kind of understanding of the principles is one of the sort of side benefits is that exactly what you described, Trina, you just notice that a certain situation is different. You talked about your mum, and I talked earlier about, you know, my dad dying, and the hospital thing, and I found that over and over again. It's not in any way a sort of conscious making an effort, being a positive person, trying to be more loving. It's just like, oh wow, I showed up differently there, and it's, for me, that's a lovely aspect of this, you know, that the change is happening almost deep inside, you know, that there is learning that goes on. There are conversations such as this that go on, and there are moments of insight and realization that we're aware of. But then there's also this kind of deeper level, and I just love it when something like that happens. And one of the things that I've noticed is I've got my son and his girlfriend here. I mean, not only are we all living here, but we're all working here, all competing for bandwidth and so on. And we have had one row, but in 3 weeks, I think that's not bad. And normally we wouldn't get through a week's holiday without, at least a couple of dust-ups. And it's just interesting, it's just interesting how, and that hasn't even been me biting my tongue or anything. Well, touch wood, maybe we'll have another dust-up tonight the minute I get off the call. But it's as though, that has just been a really nice side effect, and I am very grateful that they're here at this time, that they're that they're safe, and where I live there's a lot more, it's very green and there's a lot more room to get out and about. So I'm, and also another delightful outcome from this work for me has been when I was in when I was very much into recovery and 12 steps. There's a great emphasis on fostering gratitude and encouragement to write gratitude lists. But sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't. But they never created gratitude. They never, ever, ever created gratitude for me. It was just like, well, that didn't work. And now what I find is that I have these moments frequently, maybe most days, where I might be doing something really ordinary, like putting the bin out, and I just have this sort of bubbling up, where I'm suffused with gratitude for my life, and it's just again a kind of a gift, and maybe it always happened, and I just didn't have eyes for it, and being in this world, in this conversation, has enabled me to see it more. But it's a really lovely thing and a much more effortless but powerful experience of gratitude than these lists ever took me to. And I said one of the things that Barbara and I wrote about and I've talked about a lot is that it seemed to us that the 12 steps, perhaps like many spiritual programs and spiritual paths and so on, is a best attempt to try and give people a manual of how to awaken spiritually. And or maybe it's describing outcomes as though they were things that could be done. But it seems to me that the beauty of this work is just in just sort of coming to understand some very simple principles that, as Joe touched on, we are revealed. Our essence is revealed, and that essence includes the ability to be resilient. I mean, not to be resilient as if it's a put-on thing. That resilience incorporates resilience. That essence incorporates resilience, and it incorporates creativity, and it incorporates love and connection, and all of those things are in each of us and always have been. But speaking for myself, I spent most of my life not fully aware of them and trying to do things to get them, because I just didn't understand how I was taking my thinking and my feelings very, very seriously, and I didn't know how to do less of that. And this work has enabled me to just see that the feelings come and go, and they can't damage me. Just as my addiction, my alcoholism didn't damage me, didn't damage that essence. And this work seems to it has certainly enabled me to see more clearly what's available to me in my life and to everybody around me, people on this call, my clients, my family, that each of us is whole and complete and not defective, and doesn't have to work to get there. That's already there. So I think I kind of went off slightly at a tangent, Barbara, to the point that you were making.
We like tangents. Tangents are good.
I think some people have joined us since we were asked the question, that if there was anybody else on the call who wanted to share what has been helpful about this work in the current situation, or to ask a question, or anything at all, really. So if you have come on since, please feel free to do that. Amanda is coming on, but I think can't get unmuted.
I also see Krista's hand.
Okay.
Good.
Go ahead, Krista.
Hi.
Hi,
Oh,
Krista.
you're on mute, Krista.
I wonder if Krista's having some
She's
connection problem.
there you go.
Well,
There you go. Hi.
hi. So in all of this, you know, I'm finding myself being more aware of innocent misunderstandings that are happening within the home. You know, like it was being spoken about, the people in our home can sometimes be the interactions when you're in one place are very different since I've started to learn the principles. Initially, when I started working with Barbara, I was seeing 2 life coaches and a holistic health person. And through working with Barbara and learning about the 3 principles, you know, I've come to learn about innocent misunderstandings, which has made me a lot more, the understanding has allowed me to be more forgiving and quicker to apologize and to see my role in certain interactions. And that's been really interesting and has brought about a lot of insight for me. So I just kind of wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really do. I see, again, you know, people are in very close quarters. Whole families are very close quarters. And I really, you know, I'm concerned about, you know, so many families who don't have this understanding, whose minds become so reactive by the belief that their feelings are coming from what the other person says or doesn't do. And just that knowledge allows the mind to settle down in a way that I think that the amount of, again, I haven't had to do really any emergency calls with any of my clients, you know, because it settles us down. It turns the camera around so that we are taking a selfie. You know, we are taking a look at what the real source of the agitation is, rather than the finger pointing and the escalation of conflict. And that's a huge, huge piece of what is going to be needed over these next weeks and months. I, unlike Lynn, have not set up a lot of things yet, because I think I'm just sort of waiting for things to settle down and see what's needed. But I think that, you know, just when we can calm people's minds enough to be able to recognize the true source of their frustrations with their family, you know, or whatever expectations they may be having that are causing all the frustration, then that really is an antidote. What's going to be, I think, an increasingly much needed antidote to living in close quarters for long periods of time. So thank you for coming on and sharing that. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be going through this time without it. I don't think I'd still have a partner or very many friends. I don't know. One thing that I can just say, along those lines, when this first started, I guess I got it pretty quickly that how serious it was and how quickly we needed to move to start physical distancing from people. And a lot of my friends didn't get it right away. So two of my very closest friends who I consider, very socially conscious, really spiritually evolved, really good human beings, didn't get it, and they started making all these plans to go out for one of their birthdays and wanted me to go, and I became enraged. I mean, I was just furious. They're both in their 70s, and I was so upset. I was so enraged, and I thought, Barbara, this reaction is over the top. Over the top. What is going on with you? Where look this way, and what I started to see was, number one, I had expectations that my friends were going to behave in a certain way, right? I had I put all my values on it. But what really shifted things for me was when I looked really carefully at myself and realized, you know what, Barbara? When you want something, you seem to come up with a way to justify that. If you want that special garlic sauce from that Lebanese market, somehow your denial kicks right into play and you're able to make your way over there, And then I started to have this even bigger realization about how denial works and how we see what we see when we see it. And that I'm not in charge of what people see and when they see it. I mean, that's what we've been teaching in Al-Anon for years, And it's been at that point, my anger just kind of disappeared. All the rage went away. And then it became this sort of curious, interesting thing to see, oh, this is how denial works. And then to watch it sort of peel away. First it was like, oh, it was okay to do this. And it was okay. Oh, no, we can go to the beach. Oh, no, maybe that's not okay. Now all the beaches are closed and there are police tapes all over the town, any place there's access to the water. And now it's masks, and now it's, and so it's been an interesting process and a curious process to me to see how denial really works and how we get freed from it. And so again, none of that would have come if I had stayed locked in my way of thinking and I hadn't known, oh, right, I need to look this way for the answers. Now, now my friends are making masks and, doing sterile techniques and things are changing. But otherwise I would have probably held on to that self-righteous, judgmental place for a lot longer. Easy to do. I'm very good at climbing up on my high horse. So this has really helped me come down off of that a lot more easily.
Obviously, you've got a monopoly on that, Barbara. Not.
I do. I know I do. Yes.
Amanda, were you going to come in?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Amanda. Nice to see you.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, lovely to see you all. Sorry, I was a little bit late joining. I look forward to seeing the recording to catch the first half an hour or more that I missed. But I find it quite interesting, everybody talking about their experiences, and we talk about separate realities within the sort of nature of the three principles. And I think I've had I don't know, maybe similar to Joe, I've actually really quite enjoyed the experience myself personally. And being in Spain, we have been on lockdown which means you don't leave the house lockdown, not you go out for an hour's walk a day, or, you know, you're not allowed to leave the house. That's 28 days tomorrow that my daughter and I have done. But my experience has been different. My experience has been in mainly in everybody that I've spoken to, that they've just sort of settled into it. And I haven't seen as much as what I thought. So they sort of prepare, you know, this being prepared for the fear and the panic and everything hasn't been my experience of the people within my community, within my friends, within, and Spain had it, you know, we had it pretty bad, pretty quick, and our numbers, considering we're such a small country, and, you know, there's, but actually that's been really interesting for me. And there's something for me seeing that when we do go into these kind of times, that also the best of humanity comes out. And so seeing that is there in a lot of people, that you know, they've just played the game regardless of their belief systems, regardless of whatever they think to be true. Or me personally, it all still seems very strange. There's something not quite right for me, the whole thing going on, and so my mind gets pulled down there, and I've enjoyed it all. I've enjoyed the separate realities of it, and it doesn't mean that my heart doesn't go out for everybody that has been, you know, touched, or anybody that's been affected in any physical way. But when you spoke earlier about, you know, the 3 principles, and I enjoyed that, Peter, raising that subject. And, you know, it brings me back to, I remember years and years ago, I did a lot of training with Jack Pransky. I did 3 years on his sort of extended professional training, from 2012 or 2013. And I remember the first time that I was in this kind of a setup, or hearing this sort of stuff, and somebody talking about these 3 principles. And I remember saying to Jack, aren't you just talking about love? And he said, well, yeah, kind of, if you're not talking about, you know, personal love. And that's where I got to see that, for me, they're all the same, or one can't exist without the other. Although they were broken down, and it made sense to Sydney Banks to talk to them in that way, mind, thought, and consciousness, I really sort of see that they're, you know, that they're 3 in 1, that one doesn't exist without the other. And I love that. I love that, you know, seeing mind, thought, and consciousness in that way, is that, you know, they come together and bring what I see, bring the formless into form. That's how I see it. I see that the energy of love goes from something that's sort of formless into form, and it gets experienced that way. So I enjoyed that part of that conversation today. And I love that simpleness, you know, keeping it simple. You know, it's like we're alive, and we think, and we get to feel what we think. And that's, for me, that's how simple, you know, it really is. And it repeats, you know, because whilst we're alive, whilst we are breathing, then the principles are in action. And it's that energy of love that is expressed in all these amazing ways, including a pandemic and the drama that goes with that. And I found myself even being really excited, you know. And at first, I set up a series of webinars as well for my community straight away, but with such excitement. And I was like, oh, and somebody said to me, I don't know if I would use the word excitement. I was like, well, that's just kind of how it felt for me. There was lots of things it felt for me. And one of those was, wow, maybe people are really going to listen now because they've got time. So I was coming from my own agenda. I was like, oh, I see a gap. I see a gap where people have not got their, you know, their days filled And that's where it took me. But it is, and my truth is, for me, there's still an excitement inside of me that is this change, or this point of change that seems like it's ripe now, and it seems like people are listening, and it feels like people have gone home, and it feels like we've all come home. And I heard Bill Pettit, he was on a chat with Amir. Some of you might have seen that chat, but I think that's where I heard it. And he talked about, it's like this big global intervention. You know, that's how, and I love that. It's like, and, you know, I've worked in the world of recovery. I was head of clinic and admissions manager at a recovery center for the past 3 years. And that's actually closed now. And that's sort of the Spanish branch. So we've got 4 branches in the UK, but the Spanish branch was quieting down, and it's closed. And it felt for me like, so we're on day 28. Tomorrow would be our official lockdown. And I said to Alice, you know, most people go to rehab for 28 days. That's what it's like. We you know, we're all in rehab. It's like, it's funny to feel like, wow, to see it in that way. And so, yeah, so my experience has been different. And I've been busier, I think, than I've been for a long time. And I'd love to slow down a bit more myself personally, like Joe says with his lovely books, to the speed of love and to the speed of life. And I found myself, I got quite busy there, feeling in service. And actually there was some truth, you know, feeling like I saw everybody. I saw all the people that I know, all the coaches that I know, all the people from this world step up. Suddenly, everybody just stepped up at the same time and was putting out webinars and free coaching and offering places. And it was like, oh, wow, this is something that I've talked about for a long time, which was, when this really goes mainstream, we better get ready. We better get rested. Because we're going to be busy, you know, really busy. And yeah, so that's just my little tuppence worth from sending love from sunny Spain to everybody from the other, across the pond and wherever you all are. And we're all in this together, right? There's something very universal about this pandemic that brings it home to no matter where you are, you know. So whilst there's empathy and compassion, there's also this beautiful feeling that is coming with it, and it's full of all sorts of stuff. Yeah. Thank you, ladies, and thank you everybody on the call.
Thank you, Amanda. It's so
Thanks.
good to see you.
Yeah.
Glad everyone in your family is well.
Yeah, everyone's well, really well.
Good, good. Yeah, it does. I mean, the possibilities of what may happen at this point are pretty limitless. And it is, when you think about it in certain ways, it's so exciting to think, wow, where is this going to lead? And, you know, I think that time and the space, I used to own and operate a spiritual retreat center, and one of the hardest sells, the reason I went out of business was because I couldn't sell rest. It's unsaleable. Rest and reflection time, unsaleable. So now people are having, you know, this space, this empty space, and it's a little disconcerting. Perhaps that's my judgment, but it's a little disconcerting how quickly people have moved to fill up that space rather than to listen for what that space may have to teach them. I hope that there will be more than that. That's my hope, is that we can hear what this space has to teach us. That quiet, that still inner voice that we can heed.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure.
two things that occurred to me when I was listening to all the lovely conversations happening. I heard a comedian, I think it was a comedian, I don't remember who was it, said it, that the virus is like this divinely created, like my mother shouting to me when I was too rowdy as a kid. She'd say, "Time out, go to your room, time out." And it's like this giant timeout for all of us. And a true timeout allows you to disengage and to settle into that reflection. And that's where the insights really start popping. And one of the insights I had while Christian was talking was you were talking about how the principles really helped you see when you were reacting to something, it was your thinking that was creating the experience. And the thing that occurred to me was that before I learned the principles, I was one of these guys that was an adventurer. I was always going rock climbing or out in the wilderness, or, you know, I had to go on an adventure to escape reality, to find this feeling of serenity. There I'd be sitting on a beautiful lake in the Boundary Waters or top of a mountain out west, and I was, oh, if I could just bottle this and take it back to Minnesota with me, you know, but darn, well, I can't wait for the next trip. And I was just as trapped in the positive illusion that feeling of serenity and peace came from a situation, a circumstance, a place, something outside, but it was an attachment to that being the cause of my feeling. And one of the gifts that you pointed to there, I think, is that not only does my negative feeling not come from what other people are doing or not doing, but my positive feeling doesn't really come from what's happening either. That positive feeling is something that is it's just innate. It's a result of your thought settling. When our minds get quiet, it all gets clear, the positive or the negative or whatever it is. There's something that returns to us. And the principles are a shortcut. My friend Richard Carlson wrote a book, Shortcut Through Therapy, about the principles. And he just talked about how the principles were a shortcut to what we were really looking for without having to go through super analysis. So anyway, those were my two takeaways from today. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, lovely. I'm kind of conscious of time. Barbara, is there anything that you would like to say just to?
No, I don't. I think I've said enough. Just to wish everyone well, good health, great richness in your solitude, and may we learn what we were sent to our rooms to learn. You know.
Oh, thanks. Thank you everyone for being here and for connecting, and it's a real privilege. It really is. It's been lovely to spend some time with you and see some old friends and meet some new ones. So thank you very much.
Just a quick reminder, we are still having the conference on addiction and the three principles next September, we hope. We haven't secured a location yet because the university is still closed down, but as soon as we do, we'll let you know. And it'll either happen in that location because we don't know the unknown, what's going to happen in September. It'll either be there in that location, you know, in person, and it'll also be available virtually. But if we can't be there in person, it'll all be virtual. So just wanted to let people know.
Oh, good. Yeah, we did ask about that at the beginning, so that's great, Joe. Thanks. Excellent. Have you got a date in mind, or are you waiting to see what the
date in mind right now is the 17th through the 19th, I think. Peter, do you remember the date?
I don't remember it offhand.
Okay.
It's around that time, but it all depends on availability of the rooms that we're looking at.
Great. Sorry,
and just a reminder that Amy Johnson is going to be on next week to talk a little bit more about rest and reflection and sort of carry on with that theme. So hope you can all join us then.
Cool. Thanks. Anything else? Any other announcements?
Thanks, Barbara. Good job.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.